Okay, so let's set the scene here. Imagine you're dealing with the aftermath of a hurricane or wildfire, something just completely devastating. The last thing you're thinking about is paperwork, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, that's the reality for a lot of people trying to navigate the world of federal disaster assistance.
Yeah, it can be a real nightmare.
It really can. And that's where this bill we're diving into today comes in. H.R. 255, the Federal Disaster Assistance Coordination Act.
That's right.
So what's the deal with this bill? What's it all about?
Well, in a nutshell, it's trying to fix this whole bureaucratic mess that people have to deal with after a disaster.
So cut through the red tape.
Exactly. Right now, you've got FEMA, you've got the SBA HUD, all these different agents.
The whole alphabet soup of organization.
Yeah, and they all have their own forms, their own processes, their own timelines. It's a lot to handle, especially when you're already dealing with so much.
It's like adding insult to injury.
Right, exactly.
So how does this bill actually address that problem? What's it proposing?
So one of the key things it wants to do is streamline the whole information collection process.
Okay, so instead of filling out a million different forms.
Exactly. The idea is to have one single streamlined process for applicants.
One form to rule them all.
You got it. Less paperwork, less confusion, just a much smoother experience overall.
That sounds like a dream come true for anyone who's ever had to deal with government bureaucracy.
Tell me about it.
So that's one major aspect of the bill. What else is in there? What other problems is it trying to solve?
Well, another thing it focuses on is those early damage assessments, which are absolutely critical.
Right, because you need to know how bad the damage is before you can even start to address it.
Exactly. And right now, that process can be really slow and inefficient. So H.R. 255 is calling for FEMA to put together a task force to figure out how to speed things up.
So like a crack team of damage assessment specialists.
Something like that. And they're even talking about using new technologies like drones to help with the assessments.
Drones! Seriously.
Yeah. They could potentially survey a disaster zone way faster than people on the ground and provide really detailed information about the damage.
Wow, that's incredible. Sounds like H.R. 255 is all about working smarter, not harder.
That's a great way to put it. It's about using technology and innovation to make the system more efficient and ultimately help people faster.
And that's what it's all about, right? Helping people when they need it most.
Absolutely.
So we talked about streamlining information collection and speeding up damage assessments. Anything else in this bill that really stands out?
Yeah, there's one more thing I think is really important, and that's transparency.
Okay, transparency is always a good thing, especially when it comes to something as important as disaster relief.
Right. So HR 255 actually requires FEMA to set up a public website to track all federal assistance awards.
So anyone can go online and see exactly where the money is going.
Exactly. The idea is to make the whole process more accountable and make sure those resources are actually reaching the people who need them most.
Okay, so it's about making the system more efficient, more effective, and more transparent. It sounds like HR 255 is trying to do a lot of good.
Yeah, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
But like with any piece of legislation, I'm sure there are different perspectives on it. So what are people saying? Are there any strong opinions out there either way?
Well, we always want to look at both sides of the issue, right? And when it comes to HR 255, it actually sailed through the House.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it was a voice vote.
So nobody even objected?
Not publicly, at least.
Yeah.
Which usually means there's pretty broad support for it. You don't see that every day.
No, you don't. So it's not just some fringe idea floating around out there.
Right. This is something that people across the political spectrum seem to be getting behind.
Okay, so we've established that it's popular.
Yeah.
But who are the big voices championing this thing?
Well, leading the charge is Jenniffer González-Colón.
Puerto Rico's representative.
Exactly. She's the one who actually introduced the bill. And she's been a huge advocate for this kind of disaster relief reform, especially given what Puerto Rico went through with those back-to-back hurricanes, Irma and Maria.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a firsthand experience with the shortcomings of the current system.
Exactly. She's spoken really powerfully about how this bill could help communities like hers get back on their feet faster after a disaster.
And how would it do that?
By cutting through all the red tape and making the aid process way more transparent.
It's one thing to talk about streamlining on paper.
Right.
But it's got to be another thing entirely to actually live through those delays and see the real world impact.
Oh, absolutely. And her voice carries a lot of weight on this issue because of that experience.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Yeah.
So it's not just her though, right? Who else is in her corner on this?
So another big supporter is Rep. Sam Graves from Missouri.
Okay, and he's a
He's a Republican.
Okay, so we're crossing the aisle here, which again is always a good sign.
Exactly. It's not just a partisan issue. And his big thing is the need for better coordination between all those different agencies we talked about.
Right. All those acronyms.
Exactly. Remember the alphabet soup. So HR 255 really tries to address that by streamlining those assessments and information requests.
It's like, why wasn't it always this way?
That's a good question.
Somebody wasn't thinking.
Right. And then you've got Rep. Rick Larson. He's a Democrat from Washington State.
Okay.
And he's all about removing the barriers to disaster aid because right now it can be so hard for people to actually get the help they need.
Because of all the bureaucracy.
Exactly. And he's talked about how that can actually slow down the delivery of aid when people need it most.
It's like the system is working against itself.
It really can feel that way sometimes.
So we've got voices from both sides of the aisle, different parts of the country, all rallying behind this bill. It's pretty impressive.
It really is. It speaks to how important this issue is to everyone.
Yeah, and to be fair, in our research, we didn't actually find any officially recorded statements against H.R. 255.
That's right. It's true. We didn't.
Which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
No vocal opposition.
It could be a good thing. Maybe there's just widespread agreement on the need for reform.
Yeah, you would hope so, right?
Right. But, things can change quickly in the world of politics. What's important is that we stay informed and engaged throughout the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where does the bill stand as of today? What's the latest?
So last we checked, it had passed the House of Representatives.
Okay.
And it had been referred to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. That was back in January of 2023.
Okay.
And as far as we know, there haven't been any major updates since then.
So it's kind of in limbo.
It's in committee, yeah,
Ah.
which, can be a bit of a black box. Sometimes things move quickly, sometimes they take a while.
So we just have to wait and see.
Exactly. We're keeping our ears open for any news.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, let's talk about the potential impact here. If H.R. 255 actually does become law, what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, it has the potential to be pretty significant. It could really reshape how disaster assistance works in this country.
Okay.
Streamlining that whole process, making it faster, more transparent, it would be a game changer for communities recovering from disasters.
That's amazing. And it's sad that we even have to talk about this as being a game changer.
It is. It really is.
Because it seems like it should just be common sense, right?
It should be.
Like people are already going through so much when they've been through a natural disaster.
Absolutely.
And the last thing they need is to be battling with the government just to get the help that they need.
You're preaching to the choir here. It's all about making sure that the system actually works for the people it's supposed to be helping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we move forward with this conversation. It really makes you think about the human cost of these disasters.
Absolutely. It's not just about numbers and statistics. It's about real people's lives.
Exactly. And that brings us back to H.R. 255 and why this conversation is so important. This bill, it's not just about paperwork and deadlines.
Right.
It's about recognizing that there's a better way to support communities when they're at their most vulnerable.
And it's about empowering those communities to be part of the solution.
That's an interesting point because so much of the focus is on what the government can do, what FEMA can do. But what about the role of everyday citizens? What about individual preparedness?
It's a huge piece of the puzzle because real resilience, it starts at the ground level.
Right.
With individuals, families, neighborhoods.
It really does take a village.
Exactly. And it made me think, have you or someone you know ever been personally affected by a natural disaster?
It's funny you should ask because I actually grew up in an area that was really prone to wildfires. And I still remember those evacuations.
Yeah.
The chaos, the uncertainty, it really makes you realize how important it is to be prepared.
It does. And it makes you think about how a more streamlined system like the one proposed in H.R. 255 could make a real difference in those moments.
It really could. And I think that's what's so powerful about this deep dive. It's not just about policy, it's about people.
Exactly.
It's about connecting the dots between these big picture issues and the real world impact they have on everyday lives.
And empowering people with the knowledge they need to make a difference.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And the more informed we are, the better prepared we'll be to face these challenges head on.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into H.R. 255. Big thanks to you for breaking down this complex issue and shedding light on what's at stake.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this important topic.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. Remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more ways to get involved.
So stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.
Because the more we understand these issues, the better equipped we'll be to create a safer, more resilient future for everyone. Until next time, happy diving.